switch over. We have Lieutenant Mark Cady from Worcester, Massachusetts, who's here to speak with us about the Hurricane Sandy and their participation in that. I'll let him introduce himself.
Okay, Mark Cady, I'm a lieutenant with the Worcester Fire Department, Massachusetts, and we've been in the development of a COMT team for several years. We're kind of getting out of our infancy right now, but last November, right after SuperStorm Sandy had hit the East Coast, there was a request that came through the EMAC agreement through states to coordinate resources for communications COMT team of COMTs to come down to assist in Nassau County, which is in Long Island, New York, outside of the city. I've been in public safety, fire and EMS for 27 years, 22 of those with the city of Worcester, which is in central Massachusetts, city of about 200,000. Communications, I've been involved about 25 years. Prior to being involved with the city, I worked part-time for a local radio communications vendor in the private side. And then when I started the fire department, like any other public safety agency, when they start looking around the room, when they're transitioning to a new radio system, they're looking for their own in-house resident expert. I was the one that had the minimum qualifications, so I was newly elected into that position, which has kind of prospered throughout my career, and I found a niche that I like. Certifications, fire officer, I'm a statewide hazmat tech, so I've worked for the state as a resource in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We have 6 regional teams statewide and provided communication support for the hazmat technicians as well. And currently, I'm certified as a COML and a COMT in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So SuperStorm Sandy came ashore in New Jersey on the 29th of October, 2012. It originally came up the coast as a hurricane. The storm did get downgraded, but the impact of the storm really didn't change that much. The problem is that what we find in the public safety side is that we can handle large-scale incidents and we can handle events that take place as long as they're pinpoint events. And what I mean by that is they can be something that's catastrophic and large, but it's a focal incident. The bigger problem, the challenge that we see is when something takes out a wide area event. And what we had here was we had a storm that took out pretty much most of the coast of New Jersey, New York City proper, and then went out Long Island and it took out 2 more counties. So in the proximity of that, we're basically looking at a shore that comes up the eastern seaboard, and then Long Island kind of takes a 90-degree turn and goes out east towards the Atlantic Ocean. The proximity of these counties and the 2 states that were impacted, from an RF perspective, impact each other on a day-to-day basis. So interoperable channels of using UTACs, VTACs, 8-TAC channels, all became something that was a very, very big issue that needed to be coordinated because you could hear other agencies in other states talking just due to the proximity where you were. Everything around there is basically, at sea level or maybe, up to 50 feet above sea level. There's not much terrain there. So came ashore, had a wind diameter of approximately 1,000 miles. It was not a hurricane at landfall. The storm created similar damage to a Category 3 or 4 hurricane due to storm surge. The major impact came along the shoreline. Entire neighborhoods were destroyed. Significant flooding of New York City, which took out critical infrastructure. In New York City and in a lot of urban areas, they rely on different backhaul components to support infrastructure. It's not all wireless microwave. It might be fiber optic lines. It might be telephone lines. It might be T1 lines that are leased from other utility companies. And in New York City and Lower Manhattan, a lot of this infrastructure was destroyed due to salt water that had come in and surged in that area. So they had their systems that were impacted and taken offline due to crippling effects from the storm that took place there. Large-scale, long-term power outages. That salt water that destroyed the critical infrastructure for utilities such as phone lines, T1 lines, fiber optic cables, also destroyed power cables. And so there was a huge influx of generators. Well, long-term effect of generators is you need to look at, you can have generators that are fixed at facilities, but if you're running them one day, typically generators, the power goes out, runs for 6 or 8 hours, then the power comes back. What happens when the power is running, 2 hours, 2 days, 3 days? And talking with generator contractors, depending on what their fuel system is, whether it's natural gas or it's diesel, some sort of fossil fuel, you have to PM these things and take them offline and look at them, 3 or 5 days. How do you transition critical infrastructure over if you don't have a transfer switch to handle that type of infrastructure transition to support their day-to-day ops as well as their communication systems? So communications infrastructure was destroyed. This EMAC agreement, or Emergency Mutual Aid Compact, that takes place between states to move resources. The request came in, it was received on the 3rd of November in 2012. I had heard about it like a Thursday night. It started kind of coming to fruition. I talked to my boss. I got the approval to go. The state started handling stuff. We didn't actually deploy until Sunday morning when everything was approved. The request that came through was personnel, vehicles, and deployable equipment. Now, unlike what Mike had talked about with USAR teams and FEMA has incident management teams, there really isn't a designation, although it falls under NIMS, of COMU teams that are deployed. There is conversation that's taking place right now of advanced teams for communications resources and things like this, but this was one of the first communications-only kind of resource deployment that had ever taken place for this perspective. We were told that there were primitive living conditions, and there were. Requested to Nassau County EOC and Bethpage. Now, the interesting thing about Nassau County EOC and Bethpage is it's a private building that the county has taken over. It used to be a defense contractor. It was Northrop Grumman, and the building's kind of facilitated, broke down the middle. The county operates one half of it, and the state operates the other half of it. So when we got there, which was about a week after the storm, there were 2 EOCs up and functioning that really weren't communicating with each other. The state had one, and the county had one. So we started to see where some of the issues lied, and started to bring at least the communications pieces together to communicate. The request generated significant behind-the-scenes work. My recommendation as far as these types of deployments and these types of resources is you need to have these conversations ahead of time. You need to have the conversations with your supervisors. This needs to be a regional initiative, and you need to discuss this ahead of time so that you're not kind of pulling these resources together. What Mike did and what Brian have done is because they've had previous incidents, and because they've had previous planned events, they have that resource base. They have that group. They have that, that common core of people that they can lean on that facilitate and make this type of process happen much, much more quickly. So some of the questions, response to requesting state cost estimates. They want to know how much you make, what your benefits are. There's lots of paperwork and formality takes place, but this slows down the whole process of you actually getting out there. So this is something that, FEMA is looking at right now as to how would we change this model in the future, and these discussions are taking place at this time. Logistics and sending personnel. The problem with logistics there, as far as for us, there were 2 problems. One was lodging, because there were a lot of people being put up in hotels that had lost their homes, so there wasn't any lodging. FEMA ended up sending us an RV that we lived out of for half of the week that we were there, and fuel was the other problem. Fuel became a problem because there were a lot of people using fuel that were there. Secondly, when the storm came in, they took all the fuel tankers that were coming into New Jersey and New York and sent them back out into the Atlantic. So when we got there, I have a picture coming up in the slide presentation, you'll see on the horizon about 9 fuel tankers just lined up on the horizon waiting to come in. But that trickle-down effect over the week required law enforcement to, patrol at the police station, at the gas stations, and how do you basically take care of that? No fuel, no logistics, no communications. It kind of puts a damper on your whole operational picture. Availability of personnel, how could we get people who could go, how quickly could we go, and the readiness of the equipment we kind of put together fairly quickly. But we didn't have anything. We had cash to the radios, but as far as repeaters, antennas, cable, we put those things together on the fly over the weekend before we left on Sunday. Using COMTs and COMLs rosters, a widely distributed email list was sent out, and our Massachusetts team met with the Connecticut team outside of Bradley International Airport in Hartford, and met up with another team of 5, and they came down with us, and we worked together as 2 teams. Due to delays in the EMAC paperwork, with their governor signing off on them leaving, we actually took off in advance of them. It's kind of an advance team we wanted to get in before nightfall, got in to talk to the emergency management people from the state EOC from Albany and discuss what our mission was going to be, so when Monday morning came around, we could start doing some homework and some back work Sunday night when we got there. So we wanted to get in, at 7 o'clock, not at 11 o'clock at night, and meet with these people. So we took off and went in advance as an advance team to the bigger team. So on November 4th, we leave. We refueled on the way down there in Stratford, Connecticut, which is basically the last town in Connecticut before you enter into the state of New York proper. We were escorted by Connecticut State Police to the border, and then one of the people that we had on our team that was assigned to us works for the State Department, so we had a federal sworn resource with us, and he made all law enforcement contingencies, and New York Highway Patrol State Police met us and took us all the way into Nassau County. Problem with going outside of your circle is that when you get onto Long Island, they have expressways and crossways. One of them has bridges, arched bridges, which have height restrictions. So if you're taking mobile command posts, if you're taking tower trailers, if you're taking larger vehicles, tractor trailer trucks, any type of resources, you need to have in mind that you probably need some sort of a local resource or a local escort that can bring you with there. I ordered, we're finishing up a tower trailer for Massachusetts for a communications resource, and the vendor was bringing it up from Florida, went through the city of New York, got on the Merritt Parkway, and ripped the tower off the top of the trailer. So it had to go back to Florida to be rebuilt. So it's important to know your area, but if you're outside of your common area picture, you need to, work with locals to do that. So we had an escort that brought us all the way into Nassau County. Height restrictions with bridges. We arrived in Nassau County approximately 1,800 hours and met with state EOC. Our first initial briefing Sunday night, the problems, they had no fuel. We said, your emergency management agency requisitioned fuel trucks. By Tuesday morning, we had fuel trucks that were on scene. One diesel tanker and one unleaded fuel, regular fuel tanker. We conserved fuel where possible. Our lodging, we kept working with FEMA to deal with that. We slept in vehicles for the first few nights, and then, as I said, FEMA got us a resource where they brought in an RV that we had the ability to sleep in that, a couple trailers midweek. As I said before, this is new on the comm side, so we really have never deployed before, and we don't have the resources kind of like to live on our own. So this was a live and learn, kind of lessons learned from us from the comm side. So first things were, system restoration. That's what we were sent there for. Kind of help support some of the IMTs, but look at the locals' infrastructure and help them to support. As I said before, average topography there is anywhere from sea level, or some places below sea level, to maybe tops 50 feet above sea level. So this was a site down on the shoreline in Lido Beach, and they have a control station that covers this paging area for their volunteer fire department, and it was in a Verizon cell structure, and it was flooded. As you can see, this is the saltwater line right here, right about the desk height, and it took out this control station. This control station was tied back in with a Verizon T1 line. So what we ended up doing was going up on top of this water tank here, which is, I think, about 250 feet, and putting in a wireless PTP link on 4.9 from this water tank back to another water tank, tying it into a MUX where they had another paging station, and bringing it back to that control point. We did not do this all alone. We worked with their local radio vendor, brought their radio vendor in. So when we go back to this here, this control station was killed. What I always tell people, if you replace your infrastructure, not with a whole trunk radio system, but if you have conventional assets and you buy new repeaters and new control stations, if you have the ability to store your old RF equipment, save your old RF equipment, in a pinch, that old 25-year-old, repeater that doesn't work is easy to plug in at night and gives you something. So he had an older Master 2 repeater back, changed out the crystals, and we were able to get this repeater back up and running within the day. What's nice is line of sight down there. It was really easy to align this PTP dish. Now the team, I went out with, this is a technician, civilian technician that works for the Massachusetts State Police. We installed this PTP dish that we had brought with us, a PTP wireless link for a T1 connectivity, wireless T1 point-to-point. And back at the site, we had another technician that works for the Connecticut State Police that was filing an STA with the FCC to license this link at the same time so that we could get it up and licensed. So we brought all the different types of resources to bear so that we could deal with this. And I believe this link is still up and running today. It was paid for through the storm recovery, but I believe the link still exists today and is still up. The mission changed. When we got there, we were told that we were going to be supporting incident management team. Incident management team from Indianapolis was pulling out when we were pulling in that night. Their mission had been completed. One of the things that we were told by FEMA was get out in the field. You have to get out in the field. You have to see what's going on. You can't take it at face value that what people are telling you is what's actually taking place. So we did. We went out in the field, and then lo and behold, we found another incident management team down in Long Beach, which is another city south in the southern shore of Nassau County that was operating all on their own. They had their own communications assets. No one really knew they were there. And they had used some NYSP resources. So Wildland Fire had flown in some VHF assets and had handed out radios to the Department of Public Works that was using them for trash cleanup. And they were pulling their resources out. But nobody at the state EOC or the county EOC knew that this was going on. So it was interesting for us to kind of, one of the things that they told us is, and it kind of drilled home, was you have to get out there and see what's actually going on. Don't believe everybody is what they're telling you is going on is actually true. As the week evolved, some of the other missions that were given to us, and this is kind of how you have to weed your way through this politically, tactically, being able to handle different personalities and things, there was support for team leaders for electrical inspecting for firefighters/electricians. What happened along the coast was storm seaward surge water comes in, floods out the house. So it takes out all the electrical in the house. So now it's New England, North Shore. It's getting to be winter. It's getting to be cold. These houses need heat, whether it's oil heat or electric heat or whatever it is, they need heat. Now we've taken out the whole electrical system in the house. So the quickest thing that they need to do is get all the water, sheetrock and board and stuff out of the house so they can dry the house out, but I need electricity in the house. So how do I do system restoration? So they were putting together a plan of fire departments/electricians to be inspectors, and they needed communication support. We never ended up supporting this because they were still working on this plan when we were actually demobbed at the end of the week. Second mission was for the National Guard. The National Guard said, we need radios. We said, how many? They said, 250. We said, really? We said, what do you need 250? We said, what do you talk to each other on? Well, we have our own radios. So that's kind of what Mike said. You have to kind of delve into the problem and say, do all 250 of you need radios on this network, or do your command staff need radios on this network? So we were able to provide their command staff with radios that they could talk back to the EOC. So they had their own internal communications, and then they had a command net that they could talk back to. And then the Long Beach Public Works support was the other thing that was being supported by the Wildland Fire assets that got pulled out later in the week. So all things are going well. As you can see back in that previous picture, we're atop the water tank. It's Monday, the sun is out, it's beautiful, it's 50, 60 degrees. Everything's beautiful, the sky is blue. And then Wednesday, the weather starts to turn. We get the last PTP link in. And then Wednesday night, we wake up Thursday morning, and this is what's happening. It snowed, 8 to 10 inches overnight, and we have all this snow on the ground, and we have to deal and contend with that. Fuel was the other big source. As you can see here on the horizon, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's another one over here. 7 fuel tankers that are just waiting to go in. Fuel was a huge issue for us as far as moving assets, as far as our own vehicles, fleet vehicles, and then long-term is looking at generators. When we first got there the first night, we were tasked with assisting with the system restoration for FireCom, which is the Nassau County Volunteer Fire Department kind of consortium dispatch center. And he said, well, I have a list here of all these 10 sites that are out. So we started going through the sites and trying to figure out, well, what's wrong in each of these sites? Is it a power issue? Is it a connectivity issue? Is the site destroyed? So we were able to identify some sites where power issues. Well, if it's a power issue, is there just no power there, or is there a pole down? So we started to identify which ones, and we got priority restoration through the utility company. So we were able to bring more sites back up during the week, as well as that wireless point-to-point link. But the communications of talking between not only their local radio vendor, the person that was in charge of their fire dispatch authority, they were able to make decisions back at the EOC and started to pave the way for us as we were doing these projects. When we went out on Monday and started looking at the sites where we were going to do system restoration, you show up at a water tank and you say, there's a foreman there or supervisor there, and you say, yeah, tomorrow we're going to climb here and we're going to mount something on this tower. They're going, we're not really good with that. So back at the EOC, we had made a plan where the people of our team were going to meet with county commissioners. The county commissioners would meet with people from the water, authority, and the water commissioner authority people would make the decision, yes, we grant this approval. Then that trickled down through the effects so that when we got on site, the supervisor knew what we were doing was good. It's real difficult to say, we're going to climb up here and take care of this and do what we need to do. Getting out in the field is something of the biggest for us. As I said before, this was Long Beach. So what happened was people were coming out, they were emptying their houses out of everything that was destroyed, hence the snow on Thursday on top of it. So the DPW, trash, sanitation, they had contractors that were in there getting this out of there and bringing it out to a makeshift landfall so it could be sorted out and then taken away accordingly. So, it really doesn't matter what the mission is. As I stated, everything has some sort of communication aspect to it. It doesn't matter whether it's public works, it's a public works issue with sanitation. If this doesn't get taken care of very quickly, it becomes a public health issue because now you have all kinds of other diseases and rats and things that come along with this. Our jobs as COMLs and COMTs are to look at the incident manager, look at the IC, look at the big picture from this storm right here, and say, what do you need supported, and how do we help you? I've read a lot of after-action reports. I've been to a lot of incidents, and after incidents where the IC will say, I wish I could have done that. If you tell us during the planning phase or you tell us during the incident that you have something that you'd like to do or where he or she may see some sort of a weakness, then we have the ability to look at that from a technical perspective and say, I'll be right back. And we look at it and see, is there a solution that we can provide? And we basically take that to the next level. So some of the lessons learned that we learned in pre-planning at the local level, you got to request this assistance as early as possible. And now, as I said before, the conversation is taking place at the federal level as to should there be some sort of an advanced team, or should there be something that can help with this quicker than what this is. The problem is that we see in that wide area kind of effect is a lot of places have the resources to handle the things in-house, but when the storm affects or the incident affects the first responders and their families, then that kind of takes and pulls back a little bit. And that's where you need to reach outside of your normal circle of organization and pull in these other resources to keep the process moving. An EMAP agreement works. I watched it work, but it takes some time. Pre-approved teams at the state level, we're working on that internally, is how we move teams around. Pre-deployed assets, communications, repeaters, tractor trailers full of repeaters and things like that, and coaxial cable, antennas, the ability to kind of rebuild some infrastructure if it's destroyed, and then generators. Best thing with generators, you can have a few, but I recommend not stockpiling these things. It's easy just to have contracts with vendors and bring them in if the incident becomes large enough. They bring a whole different skill set of resources to the table. You need to be self-sufficient for at least 48 hours, food, lodging, and fuel, as soon as you hit the ground, to figure out what's going on there and what you need for resources. relationships with vendors, into order equipment, specific communications assets. We brought resources with us. We brought caches of VHF radios, we brought caches of UHF radios, and 800 radios with us. Curveball that was thrown to us was Nassau County Police Department has a beautiful 20-channel, 512 megahertz UHF trunking radio system. So we had, XTS 5000 UHF portables that did not have feature set for trunking. So we were able to, read all the codes out of them, shoot off to Motorola. They sent us flash codes, and we were able to, by middle of the week, upgrade all of our caches to UHF trunking. But this is another resource that, a lot of cache radios don't have. It's come with a full feature set in them. They'll probably have, analog, conventional interface for digital, for P25, but they don't come fully loaded for cache radios. Ability to file for STAs with FCC frequency coordination. The other nice thing, while we were there, we had people from the FCC actually there, as well as NTIA, to deal with and help resolve issues with interference both on the private side and on the public safety side. One of the problems that we did run into on the public safety side with the FCC was in the VTAC and UTAC areas, although the primary functional use under the FCC for the interrupt channels is interrupt communications, the secondary use, if they were still licensed, people can still use them. So we still had people that were using, we heard like two-tone paging that was taking place on some of the UTAC channels, way off in the distance, but there was still, those things are still out there, haven't been fully resolved yet. One of the lessons learned that I'll just throw out there real quick, that we learned that as far as like fuel generators, take it down to the next level, is power, radios. Two things that we learned real quick over the last year after the week of the bombing at the marathon was contingencies you need to take care of in the field, and think about our battery replacement and charging in the field. We're currently building out right now a small trailer that's going to charge just batteries and have the ability for people to come up and recharge phones and stuff like that. One of the things we learned Monday night after the Monday marathon was, the marathon starts early in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, but it usually concludes by about, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But most people are using, phones are huge, heavy users. Their phones, you'll find that unless you have like an extra battery pack with your phone or something, that your battery's starting to taper off in the afternoon. Well, by 5, 6 o'clock at night, we had command staff that were looking for chargers. We need Android chargers, iPhone 4, iPhone 5 chargers. People had no chargers with them in the field, and their phones were dying. End of the week, where they had the situation that started on Thursday around midnight, went into early morning Friday, was as soon as you went past that first operational period and came into the next one, that's when officers in the field's radios started, batteries started dying. So having the ability to have cache radios, but have batteries that you can hit that second operational period and support those. Your system is only as good as the end subscriber units that are out there, and if they don't work or they don't functionally, are kept up,